Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the story by military veterans. Get yourself ready. It's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I am your host, Andrew Cox, and today we'll be having a My Veteran Story with Marine veteran Dan King. But before we get into the episode, are you enjoying the podcast? And go to the Lost Art website. That's the lostart.podbean.com. Go check it out. Be sure to click on that merchandise tab and get you some cool new gear to help support the podcast and get our veteran voices out for all to hear. You can also check us out on YouTube at The Lost Art with Andrew Cox. And be sure to smash that like button and follow and subscribe. If you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, and email me directly at thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com, and we'll get you scheduled to be on the program.
Shit, it's the fan. They'll drive through hell in a gas truck with you.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, that's a good point. Wow. So you did 6 months, 6 month deployment there, and then you came back, and did you stay at that command or did you go somewhere else?
No, I stayed there, but I also did another deployment, if you call it that. It was a CONUS deployment. I spent 10 months down at Blount Island in Jacksonville, Florida, doing MPF reconstitution. The whole MPF, capability. Those ships have to come in every 18 months to 2 years and reconstitute.
No kidding.
All that stuff can't sit out. It can't sit out on the ocean, for that long. And then on top of that, a lot of this stuff was getting used because we offloaded MPF for deployments. We pulled MPF ships in. I remember we offloaded some of them. January 2003. So I spent down there doing that. It was, I would say, my company grade time, which I retired as a captain. I was a company grade the entire time as an officer, but my company grade billets, I led a very charmed life as a logistics officer. I got to be a platoon commander. I got to do MPF. I did a brief stint as a S4 Alpha, in there, and then I got to be a company commander. And then I got to be a program manager doing armoring. Whenever we start armoring all the 7 tons, I was the armor officer for the 7 ton.
Okay.
Yeah, for the 7 ton fleet. I led a very charmed life. And what I mean by that, for any folks out there that understand I was never an MMO, never a maintenance management officer. One of the worst gigs to have right there. So, I was, and it was just by luck. Nothing, happened. It was, was never at that place where they needed an MMO at the time. So
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, spent 10 months down at Blount Island, then came back, and then I PCS to Cherry Point.
Okay.
And I did 2 deployments to Al Assad with Cherry Point, and my first one, that was the S4 Alpha with Mag 26, I believe it was. I was what you call a fobbit. Those people that don't leave the forward operating base. They are eaters and shitters. Yeah, that was me.
Eaters and shitters.
It is what it is, man. You got to look at it operationally. That's what we were. We were eaters and shitters. And my main thing there was billeting for transient crews that were coming in. That's when I learned it was what is it? The Prowler, Navy Prowlers. We had a detachment come in off an aircraft carrier to run some missions while they were there. It was 2 planes or 3 planes. Not that, it was less than 5 planes.
Yeah.
2 pilots per plane and 65 support personnel.
What?
The tail end that has to support an aircraft, any aircraft, it's stunning, man. It's stunning. So that was an eye-opening experience for me, seeing that level, that footprint come in, and we had to, ensure that we had taken care of, the entire outfit that was coming in to do that. and they were all needed. I
Wow.
mean, it was all mandatory. Of course, you have a lot of electronic warfare stuff on those planes. So
Yeah,
there was a
yeah.
lot of that as well. But
Holy
yeah,
cow.
it was eye opening. I was like, okay, a couple pilots, they got, three or four maintainers will come in and keep this sucker going. And then, no, that's not the case. So,
Wow.
I'm scrambling to find building for all these folks. That was, and then while I'm there, everyone goes through a gym phase, or
Mhm.
everyone really goes through, to the gym while they're in deployment because there's really not much else to do. And, the
Right.
power deployments they were dry, no alcohol at all or anything.
Hmm.
So, and working out in the gym, and it was, fortified. It was, in a, total concrete building. There were HESCO barriers all around the building, and a Katyusha rocket lands outside the building.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, the impact and the concussion from that was startling. Never any
Huh.
danger whatsoever, but man, it knocked me off the bench I was sitting on lifting weights.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's like then you get new respect for some of the power of these weapons that
Yeah.
that have been developed on both sides, the
Wow.
Axis powers and the Allied powers, for lack of a better term.
Mhm.
If you're into that game,
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that is absolutely crazy. Knocked you off the bench.
yeah,
How far
yeah.
away did it land? Like, what do you think?
Probably, I don't know. It was 40 yards. It was, like I said, it
Okay.
was. I mean, the concussion from it was stunning. It could have been closer. I really don't even remember. I mean, I didn't, you
Yeah.
know, rang my bell a little bit. My ears were ringing for a little bit on that. But yeah, there was no.
I
It was
imagine
actually
so.
to the point where I'm not saying people were used to it, but 5 minutes later, everyone was back to doing what they were doing.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's you definitely get a different viewpoint when you see things like that on the regular basis. It definitely changes your mindset.
yeah, yeah. So from there, I went back. Because I was stationed. I was basically attached to uh, mall headquarters, and I was
Hmm.
deaded out to the mag for that deployment. And then whenever I
Okay.
came back, then I went to the duty station. I was, to the billet I was supposed to, which was Marine Wing Support Squadron 271 on Cherry Point, and
Okay.
that's where I was able to, be lucky enough to be a company commander for 2 years. And we did
Oh,
another
wow.
deployment there to Al Assad, and we ran a lot
Okay.
of convoys. One of the big things that we did there during the time is the helicopter landing pads, the AM1, AM2 matting,
Hmm.
the aluminum matting that to land planes
It
on.
all
Well,
connects. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, we had to prep the battle space for Ospreys to come in. The Ospreys were starting to
Oh,
integrate
wow.
into the force, and it's different matting, different coating because of the downwash of that aircraft is so hot.
Mm.
And so between our company doing all the transportation and the engineering company that we had at the MWSS, still really good friend of mine, Taylor White. Um, his company did all the work, and prep. We would go out to where we had these Hilo landing pads, and we'd pull them up, prep the ground, and lay a new pad that was big enough for
Hmm.
Ospreys and
Wow.
fit the Ospreys to land on too. So that was the big mission set that we did there.
Wow. That's really cool. And how long would it take to set up, tear down one of those pads?
They would have it done soup to nuts less than 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, and you get better at
Wow.
it. It's just like anything else. There's learning curve, and you get better
Hmm.
with it. Your dozer operator gets better at prepping the ground. Your hydro seeder gets better at spraying the ground with the underlayment that goes under it. And then
Yeah.
your engineers get better at connecting the matting. So the more we did it, the more the faster it got. And
Right.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was good times. Again, of course, that was probably a more dangerous situation. Running convoys, in the Anbar province at that time. But
Hmm.
I'll tell you, we were lucky. It was, pretty much benign,
Wow.
pacified battle space as we go. We didn't really run into anything.
Yeah. And what year was that, you said?
That was 2007. 2000. See, I did 3,
Okay.
5, and 7. Yeah, I did a deployment 3, 5, and 7.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty cool. And what were some of the things that you remember from each of your deployments that like lessons learned type of stuff?
Oh,
Did you hear that? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I'm thinking, I have to dig deep. It's, the first and the last, the platoon commander and the company commander are the ones that stick out,
Hmm.
and you think, being a platoon commander is a lot of stress. You have, your 50 operators or whatever the capability set is, your 50 infantrymen or whatever in your platoon, and you think that's a lot of stress. That's nothing compared to being a company commander. Whenever
Yeah.
you have, I don't remember what I had, 120 to 140, and the majority of these people are 19 to 24-year-old lance corporals and corporals. You have, basically America's, youngest generation,
Hmm.
that's just, coming to adulthood. They're your responsibility, and
Yeah.
putting an operation plan together to, get a convoy out in the battle space and get it, to the place it needs to go, and planning that out, it's a level of stress that you can't comprehend because, everything could potentially succeed or fail on your plan in your planning.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point.
yeah, and you learn to become tight with, all the, commanders and people involved, your OPSO, your company commanders, and your XOs, at the company level. It's stressful. And, even then we did have, it was a convoy I wasn't on. We did have a truck run up on an IED. So I did have one Marine get a combat, or two Marines get a combat action ribbon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the company, because they hit an IED. It either malfunctioned, or it wasn't built properly, or it was a pipsqueak, because it barely even stopped the truck. The truck
Oh, wow.
still yeah, they still drove the truck, out of what we would call the danger zone, whatever that dictated distance was to get away from the blast.
Right.
And then the truck stopped, and then the radiator was all, draining out. But yeah, it's still,
Oh,
still happens.
yeah. Yeah. That's, I don't even, I can't even comprehend that level of stress when it comes to, a company commander type deal. That's pretty wild.
But and I'm sure it gets elevated as a battalion commander, and then as a regimental commander, and then the
Yeah.
stuff, all the way up to a CG level, and the stuff that they have to think about and consider when they're making a decision.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did have the opportunity to be in the op shop at Second Mall headquarters whenever a
Hmm.
mission's getting ready to go out, and the stuff that's briefed that you would think is not related at all is related to that CG making a decision whether if that mission goes out or not.
No kidding. Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing to watch and to see,
Mm.
how everything factors in, politically, operationally, and basically just from a basic manpower standpoint.
Wow. Yeah. I'm glad I didn't have to make those decisions.
You have to have the uncomfortable conversations in those ops meetings, about forecasted losses if you end up going kinetic in a situation.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just, and having those conversations, it's a stressor just having that conversation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Man. Wow. That's crazy. Uh, okay. So you did three deployments, and then what happened then? Where were you?
So come back from the last deployment, ride out the last couple months at Cherry Point as a company commander. And then, by this time heck, I don't know, I'm 38, 39 years old. Still, I'm a
Mm.
captain. So, not your average bird, so to speak. And my boss at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Laviolette, rocket surgery, smart guy,
Yeah.
physics, you know, and he had had a lot of experience in the Marine Corps operationally and administratively. He had spent a lot of time, at the Pentagon, at Quantico,
Right.
doing your non-fleet billets and stuff. And he looked at me and says, Dan, for where you're at in life and for what he says, you need to go to Marine Corps Systems Command and be a project officer. I looked it up briefly a little bit, and I was, what project officers do there. And I was like, all right, sold. Give me a different skill set, and
Yeah.
took it to heart, and I did it. And that's when I
Okay.
became the project officer for the armor for the 7-ton trucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that, gives you, the acquisition experience. And there's a whole lot of certifications involved that you have to build up to. And and
Mhm.
courses to go through. And I was able to do all that while I was there in the tour and get the certifications. And it sets you up for success, even, post active duty career.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. And then talk us through some of that duty that you did with the acquisition, the 7-ton stuff, all that. Talk us through that.
So requirements, especially power requirements. I'm not talking engine power. I'm talking electrical power. Started becoming more and more intense. Because we had, we would have those electronic bubbles. One
Hmm.
of them was called the chameleon system that would, sit on the vehicle, and it was an electronic bubble. The idea was is that, if an IED was going to be remotely detonated, they couldn't do it while if that truck they could not do it within the bubble of that truck.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of power requirements there. And I want to say the original alternator that came on the truck was 150 amps, 200. Anyway, it was pretty large to, automobile purposes, but it wasn't
Right.
large enough to start powering all this, ancillary equipment we were starting to hang on vehicles. So we quickly went up to a 300 amp requirement. Well,
Wow.
yeah, the thing that was difficult with that initially is that the technology had not even been invented to make an alternator that puts out that kind of power in a package that would fit in the truck. It was physically too big. So,
Wow.
yeah, there had to be, a lot of R&D going on and creativity to build an alternator to reduce the size, and then also do some modifications to get an alternator in the truck. And so we were able to do that. The armor protection, you've seen that. I know everyone had seen that. It was wide, spread news at the time, and how that was changing and evolving, you know, putting armor plates in the floor. What was the protection
Hmm.
on the side? The ballistic glass involved.
Yeah.
A set of windshields for a tactical vehicle, armored windshields, was $10,000 at the time.
Ooh, no kidding.
Yeah, that's the
Dang.
that's that's the level of investment that was being made on these vehicles, to keep everyone safe. So it was
Yeah.
significant, and the armor kept getting bigger and heavier, and it was,
Hmm.
and we had armor that was developed at the time that was thinner and lighter, but it was, one time use. If it took one shot,
Oh,
it had to come off and be replaced. So, the cost based decision was to go the heavier armor that, if it got shot at, well, it's still a piece of armor. It's intact. It'll be fine.
right.
Um, so there were a couple variations of armor. I did have one huge scope, which, it was all the MEF Motor T officers, at the time, which are the Chief Warrant Officer fives.
Okay.
The big five. There's five Chief Warrant Officer fives in the Motor T field, and we did have one aw shit moment where won't even say who it was or where it was, but we had, I want to say it was 100. It was over 100 trucks make it on a ship and get shipped over to Iraq, and it did not have the alternator upgrade.
Oh, no.
So you have to go, as soon as we uncovered that, we have to go back and unwind that, and then get a team
Wow.
sent over to go do the installations, because it's not just the MOS Marine mechanics aren't equipped to do that, nor do they have the, time, effort, and energy to do those modifications. So we had to,
Right.
set that.
Yeah.
So that was a big event whenever that happened. But yeah, that's what I did for 3 years, and I thought I was going to be an acquisitions officer because that's a separate MOS. I'd been set up; I was qualified to be an acquisitions officer, but one of the
Right.
also the requirements was to be a major. So I
Oh,
left,
okay.
and the monitors for your unrestricted officers, they have their duty is to keep you competitive for promotion. So
Hmm.
that's why you see officers rotating a lot, because you have to get
Hmm.
people in. Like, case in point, logistics. It's the second, or it's always the second or third largest MOS in the Marine Corps for officers.
Hmm.
And you have this rule, whether if it's written or unwritten, that you have to have fleet time at every rank to remain competitive for promotion. Well,
Yeah.
90% of all of the log billets for majors are in the National Capital Region. So when you see logistics officers rotating every 6 months as majors, That's why, because I got to get all these guys fleet time.
Holy
So
cow.
I ended up having to rotate out, but I, had a decent relationship with the monitor. She was a neighbor of mine in stationed at Cherry Point, and I told her, I said, hey, I'd like to, become an acquisitions officer. So can you park me here at Cherry Point until the next acquisition selection board? She said, absolutely. So I go over to McCittick. I'm there for 8 months, and then I get a call from the general, the commander at Syscom, and because we had a decent, rapport. And he calls, he says, I thought I was going to be able to have an acquisitions board and select some young blood this year. He says, but over the last 2 years, we flooded the field. So they didn't even have an acquisitions board that year. So I said, all right, well, I wasn't going to hang out for another year, and then potentially run the risk of not being able to remain competitive, for lieutenant colonel or colonel. So I retired at that point.
Yeah.
I retired, and then I did the typical. I worked for a defense contractor, supporting the office that I was in.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
yeah. You already had contacts or whatever, and you just kind of floated over.
I already had the contacts, and then I was, supporting the 7-ton office as a contractor, which worked out well at the time that I was doing it, because there was a lot of continuity there. But it's also a completely different. It's a completely different mindset and a completely different environment, because you have what they call the filthy contractors and the slimy government workers. So I had gone from active duty to being a filthy contractor. So that was kind of funny. Yeah. I was the active duty guy. I used to roam the halls on Friday.
Yeah.
As for the civilians that work there, you have CWS in the federal government, compressed work schedule. So you work, enough time where you get one Friday off every pay period. I used to roam the halls in the office when I was on active duty, hold my cup of coffee. I go, today is CWS day. Today is civilian work stoppage day.
I like it.
I didn't make a whole lot of friends doing that, but I had a good time.
Oh man. So what would you say experience wise for anybody, like if they're going into the contractor stuff, what advice would you have?
Well, if you're, leaving active duty, again, it's the same thing as what, I experienced going from being a staff sergeant to a lieutenant. You have to humble yourself. And even if you're talking with someone there that is just completely backwards or just flat out wrong, you have to find a creative way to steer them into righteousness.
Wow.
Because your job is to make them look good. It's not to make you look good. You're the filthy contractor. They'll drop that contract and replace it with another one, the next week. Your job is to make that office successful.
Right.
And support your government counterpart in any way that they require.
Wow.
Again, a difficult transition, but not as difficult. Had a few more years of life, as I call it, time on Earth. Under my belt, and so it wasn't as difficult as going from a staff sergeant to a lieutenant, but there was still some growing pains with that.
Yeah. Wow. Now, and how long did you do that, the contracting gig?
8 months.
8 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what? What did you do after that?
I was lucky enough to get a government billet. So PP&O had I was at Plans, Policies, and Operations. PP&O had advertised. They are the parent command for, I forget what it's called, Scalable Effects now, but it was the Joint Non-Lethal Directorate. So all non-lethal weapons for DOD, are run through the non-lethal directorate, and they advertised a program management billet for the non-lethal weapons. And I didn't know the commander of the personally, colonel at the time, but there was facial recognition there because of, he was obviously an acquisitions officer and had been, throughout Syscom, and he was an infantry officer, and I applied for the job. I made it through the filters and I got an interview. Well, then whenever I got the interview, performed well enough to get a second one. I got the second interview, and then the colonel comes in and he recognized me and asked me about, my history, where I come from and what I did. And then, I was offered the job. So, came in
Wow.
as a govy at that point and did non-lethals for 4 years.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, and that was, good times, lots of interesting stuff going on with that. Biggest thing was trying to think of what they had going on. What was it called? Anyway, it's a grenade that shoots out of the what's the grenade launcher straps on the bottom of the
The
M16?
203?
The 203. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
203 launched grenade that was non-lethal.
Oh,
You
wow.
shoot it, yeah, and it's got electronics in it, and before it reaches impact, it explodes. And
Okay.
whether if it's light or a sound or a net or what have you, whatever it's packed with, that's what is non-lethal that goes against your intended target. Um,
Wow.
I don't know if they ever perfected that technology, but it had been demonstrated and was successful a time or two, on there. But technologies like that was being, they're being developed, and it was neat stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
active denial technology. Which is it's a millimeter wave, not a microwave. So a
Okay.
microwave, yeah, when you get hit with anything that gets hit with a microwave bakes whatever it's hitting from the
Yeah.
inside out, right? A
Okay.
millimeter
Yeah.
wave is the exact opposite. It goes from the outside in. It's the
Oh, wow.
same, yeah, it's the same beam you get hit with in the airport.
Really?
They just change the frequency and amp the power up on it. So then whenever you
Huh.
get hit with it, you heat up.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I went out to a test range actually at 29 Palms. I went out there as a civilian with the non-lethal
Okay.
director for a testing run, and demonstration, a tech demo. And I stood in front of it, and from 800 yards away, they shot me with this beam. And you go from feeling normal, just looking around like nothing's going on, to instantly you feel like you're on fire. Because
What?
yeah, what it does is the moisture that's in your skin and the top
Uh-huh.
layers of your skin, it heats that up because it's going from the outside in. And the only thing you can
Wow.
think of is getting away from it.
Holy cow.
Yeah, they perfect that technology. That's going to be really good for controlling crowds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane. People a lot smarter than me are doing it.
Yeah.
I can't even
Yeah.
think of things like that. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and I don't know where that's at in development either, but that was out there, open source. I mean, you could see ADT is what it was called, on the
Yeah.
website, the active denial technology. Um, yeah, very interesting stuff.
Hmm.
And then, in relation to Quantico, I'm living, my family and we live in Fredericksburg, and
Hmm.
so 4 years into my government career, I Billet come open, advertised for the VA, doing project management, setting up contracts, for buying medical equipment, same project
Oh,
management
okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
I applied for it, was lucky enough to get that, and so now, I'm based out of Fredericksburg as a VA employee, setting up medical equipment contracts.
Yeah. How do you like that job and working with the VA?
It was different because when you're in the DoD and you're in that environment, everything is it's hierarchical. It's not matrixed. So you have one boss for
Hmm.
everything. Everything in the VA, and there's a pros and cons for everything, is matrixed.
Hmm.
So say the contracting team that we work with that puts the contracts and signs the contracts and gets them in place, they don't work for us. They have their own boss, their own chain of command. Program management has its own chain of command. So it's different, and
Yeah.
it's a different way of communicating to get to the end, because you don't have one overarching program manager that can just go do this because I said so.
Wow. So you have to develop relationships a little bit more in that
Yeah,
environment, I would assume. Yeah.
it's all about building the relationship. Once you get a good relationship, with your contracting team, your specialist and your contracting officer, then it turns out being golden.
Yeah.
And we're in a good spot right now currently, which hasn't always been the case with our office. With the contracting shop we work with, we're in a good spot. We're getting a lot of awards done. Um,
Nice.
you
Wow.
know, the team I'm on manages for the VA the Da Vinci surgical robot contract. I think we're the
Okay.
second or third largest customer for that company.
Wow.
That's a huge contract, and that technology where robotic surgery, a
Yeah.
doctor's doing it, but he's doing it on a joystick, in a
That
video
is
screen. I
wow.
I watched a doctor perform a hernia procedure in 20 minutes in and out of the torso. It's some of the most amazing stuff that you'll ever see.
Wow.
Yes.
It's amazing how far we have come. Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah. So basically that's it. And then that's where I'm at now. And not to mention that in 2009 when I retired, my wife and I started our own music store. So,
Yeah.
I got a
Yeah.
music store, as my side job, you know.
Yeah. But your side job is keeping you fairly busy.
Well,
I mean, you said how many employees did you have? It was 8?
oh, that's just in the repair shop. Total, we probably have about 15. We service,
Oh, wow.
yeah, we call on up to 200 schools now.
Yeah.
Just this summer alone, we're going to end up repairing 4,800 instruments for middle
Yeah.
and high school.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be a fairly decent sized repair shop.
It's smaller than you would think, but it's about as efficient as we can get it. We've always and
Yeah.
we are tapped now. There's no more room to make improvement to find efficiencies. That last
Yeah.
year was it. So if we end up getting any more work called upon us,
Yeah.
something's got to give. Yeah, the shop won't be able to handle it.
So you either have to get a bigger shop or turn away business at that point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the shop's probably about 2,000 square feet
Oh,
total.
wow.
So it's not
Yeah.
huge, when you think about the scope of the instruments run through, but it's not necessarily small either. But for
Hmm.
this, the amount of work that we have coming through, it's at its max.
Yeah. Wow. So you're working I would say almost triple overtime there doing that along with the VA stuff. I mean, you're working pretty good hours, I imagine,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah. I'm
pretty
working
bad hours.
every day. I do 7:30 to 1600. Still do the typical Marine schedule with the VA job,
Yeah.
and then get off work at 1600. By 1700, I'm doing repairing horns and helping out and doing things. Because we
Yeah.
do orchestral instruments too, so I picked that skill
Oh,
up.
wow.
So all the
Yeah.
orchestral stuff is on me. And then, now we've gotten to the point where we got some, people with experience to do all the brass wind and woodwind stuff.
Okay. Wow. Now, did you go back to Red Wing for the classical stuff?
No, 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 no. So the repair community is pretty small. You end up building a network of, contacts and friends. And
Yeah.
one of the people that, I networked with out of Baltimore is a fine brass wind and woodwind tech, but he's also been to Luthery school, for
Oh,
building
wow.
guitars and repairing orchestra instruments. So I
Yeah.
actually paid him to come down and spend a week with me.
Oh,
And
okay.
because I asked him, I said, hey, how much, how long would it take you? I go, me personally, what I can, am and am not capable of from a mechanical standpoint. How long would it take you to show me the basics of orchestral repair? He said, I can get you the basics in your brain in about a week. However, it'd take, 6 months to a year for that to develop into smooth, efficient running repair for you. I said, score, come
Okay. Yeah.
down. Yeah, paid him. He came down, trained me up, and then, I messed around with it off and on. We started renting instruments as well. So I'm doing my
Hmm.
rental fleet where if I screw something up, it's our instrument and I can,
Yeah.
set it aside and start. Or, I took the time, however long it was going to take me, I would take that time to get it right. And then whenever I
Hmm.
felt comfortable, then we started pitching to the school systems. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. Started doing
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Now
Okay.
now I can do a violin bridge in 7 minutes.
Wow. That's awesome,
So
man.
yeah, it's all learning curve, and
Yeah.
anybody else is, it's definitely not a braggadocio thing because there are people out there that can do it faster than me. They can
Yeah.
take one swipe with a knife and, you know, sand a curve on a belt sander and, notch it up on the right measurements and done with it in 4 minutes. I've seen it done. It's amazing. Some of these guys.
Wow. That is wild,
Yeah.
man. It's good stuff. Well, I mean, you got a ton of stuff going on, and obviously very successful at all of it that you've done up to this point. So, looking back over your career, looking back, what advice would you have for one, the veteran community, and then two, anybody that's active duty? What advice and words of wisdom would you have for those guys?
Any aspirations you have, don't wait. Just do. Don't wait to do that. I.e., case in point, the orchestral repair stuff that I paid. The guy that I networked with that's really good at that, I'm old enough to be his father.
Oh, wow.
But he, don't wait. Grab a hold and go.
Yeah.
Use the resources that are available to you, and don't let anybody tell you no. Don't let anybody laugh you off, because there were people that were, kind of, looking at my wife and I, with a, tilted eye, roll, because there was already an established music store in this area that,
Yeah.
had been around for 30 years, 40, 35 years at that point. And, I said, well, this is what we're doing. Well, how are you going to do it? I said, I got business. I need what, well, fast forward, to, 10 years after that, they're no longer in business.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I put them out, or my wife wouldn't say that either, because there was, they were a couple generations older than us, but it was a logical progression. We were winding
Hmm.
up, they were winding down.
Yeah.
And that's how, and just grab a hold. Don't let anything hold you back, no matter where you're at in life.
Yeah. That's great advice too. Yeah. I like that.
Never too
Yeah.
late. I didn't start going to college and taking it seriously until I was 26 years old.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on, telling your story. Very unique story all the way across. You've ran the gamut of different things throughout your career. Very impressive.
Oh, saved round, saved round. Told you I had to
Yeah,
play
go
the
ahead.
trumpet. Had to play the trumpet in Officer Candidate School. So that
Yeah,
story
yeah,
is,
yeah.
you have a field day, field meet, and you're competing against all the platoons. All the platoons are competing against each other. O course relay races. Doing all kinds of running. Or, the Quigley combat conditioning course, stuff like that. And it's a big thing that's going on. It's
Yeah.
an all day long event. Well, just so happens what it was, a change of command was coming on. If memory serves me correctly, no, it would, that math wouldn't work out. But anyway, there's a change of command that was, I think it was OCS, and it was going to
Okay.
happen out there on the OCS parade deck. So the drum and bugle detail was there for the rehearsal during the
Uh-huh.
same day as our track meet. And my platoon sergeant said, "You know either of those guys over there?" I said, "I know one of them." And he goes, "Go see what you can do." So I went over there and I grabbed his trumpet. Now, I was playing charge, for the platoon at Officer Candidate School. So yeah, it was
Oh man, that's good. I like it. Man,
yeah.
very cool. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Is there you want to say hi to anybody before we close this out?
Um, Anybody I served with, everyone's got their own story. Everyone's, done good things, done bad things. I've been the bully. I've been bullied. Any of those people out there, I'm sorry. Um, so to everybody I served with, I don't have anybody in particular, because, I've had, good relationships all around. At least I feel I have. You have,
Yeah.
one or two out there, negative impacts, but it's, you know, you leave that to the side, don't worry about
Yeah.
that. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
peace out to
Very cool.
everybody out there I've been with.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. Truly appreciate it. To all the veterans out there, just remember, if you're struggling, you need some assistance, you're thinking about hurting yourself, anything like that, the VA has some incredible resources. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can also text 838-255, or go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on that chat icon. Any of those options are going to get you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But one veteran life lost is one too many. So please, please, please reach out for help. One last time, Dan, thanks for coming on and telling your story. Very much appreciated. To all the listeners, stay motivated, change your socks.